I didn't do that. Good afternoon. My name is Erwin Morris, and I'm the Executive Director of the School of Public and International Affairs, and I'm happy to be able to join with Sarah Hall, the Director of the Institute for Emerging Issues, to welcome you to Constructive Compromise, Governance in Our Polarized Political Environment. I want to start by thanking the IEI and SPIA staff members that made this event possible, especially Samantha Graham, Tariq Woods, and Kelly Schwim. And I want to thank you all for joining us. The 1950 report of the American Political Science Association's Committee on Political Parties toward a more responsible two-party system decried the state of our political parties. It was particularly critical of both Democrats and Republicans, what the authors referred to as Tweedledee and Tweedledum, because they were indistinguishable. The authors saw the party system's great flaw as the absence of a meaningful choice. Today, the world that the APSA committee saw is all but unimaginable. While there are real disagreements about the character of polarization in our political system, there is also a very real impression among the public that our political parties and its partisans stand for such different principles and represent such different groups that they simply can't work together. One obvious indication of this frustration in North Carolina is that a plurality of registered voters are unaffiliated. And according to a 2023 Meredith College poll, a plurality of these voters view both parties as extreme. Our panelists are here today to help us understand that we can still work together and that our public leaders are on a daily basis figuring out how to solve crucial public policy problems and how to serve our communities. I'd now like to invite my co-host, Sarah Hall, to the podium.
Thank you, everyone. Just so glad that you're all here this evening to hear from our distinguished panel. In addition to those of you in the room, we also have many folks who couldn't be with us, but did ask that we record this evening's conversation. And so in addition to being here in this room, we are live streaming this on YouTube and LinkedIn at Institute for Emerging Issues, as well as on Instagram at Emerging Issues. And you can go to these channels later on, share it with your friends and others who couldn't be here. And then just a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us live. So our mission at IEI is to serve as a nonpartisan connector, bringing North Carolinians together across sectors, regions, and perspectives to collaborate on finding solutions to the state's most emerging and critical policy issues. Our vision is a North Carolina where people connect and collaborate to build a vibrant and prosperous future for all. At our core, our vision requires that citizens from all walks of life be civically engaged in their communities. And here in North Carolina, we have been tracking our state's civic health since about 2000 using US Census data in some of the supplemental surveys. In partnership with programs housed in public and private universities across the state, including those at Chapel Hill, Western Carolina University, Elon University, and Duke University, next month we will be releasing the 2024 Civic Health Index for North Carolina. I don't have any slides because, again, the official launch is not until next month. But I did want to provide you with some key data points that I think will really help frame some of the discussion today. First, and these are all across variables that really are indicators of community civic health. First, North Carolina ranks 6th highest in the nation for those volunteering on a fairly frequent basis, but only at about 25%. Still, that means 75% of us are not volunteering in a consistent, meaningful way. Less than a third of us, 29%, say we frequently talk or spend time with our neighbors. Only about 20% of us work collaboratively with our neighbors to do something positive for their community or neighborhood. 30% of us frequently discuss political, societal, or local issues with family or friends. Although based on our last program of work, we know that people are more likely to talk about politics than financial resilience, just an aside there. And when it comes to attending public meetings and engaging local public officials, North Carolina ranks close to the bottom. We're 47 out of 50. And when it comes to voting, the last data available reveals 51% of us are registered to vote and 45% of us actually do vote, ranking us near the very bottom of all states. But one of the key findings from this report that's very relevant to today's discussion is that younger North Carolinians, those ages 16 to 29, participate less than other age groups on every measure except one. Does anybody want to guess what that is? All right, I should have had some door prizes. I'm spending time with family and friends. So if you'd like to learn more about the North Carolina Civic Health Index, I hope you'll join us next month for our report release, and we'll be sending out information in the coming weeks. So why are we here today? Because again, at IEI, we believe that strong civic participation goes hand in hand with achieving our vision and mission of working together to find solutions to our state's most emerging issues. And again, I just want to thank you all for being here, especially with that little thing going on called March Madness. Go Pack. But now I want to turn it over to IEI Policy and Program Director Tariq Woods and our distinguished panel.
Testing. Thank you, Sarah and Erwin, much appreciated. And thank all of you, thank our panelists. It's so nice of you to take your time out and talk to some of the other young folks who are interested in policy. So really quick, just before we get started, immediately after this panel, we'll have networking and more sharing, more conversations, and that's the real meat of this event today. So make sure you stick around, grab some more food, and we'll be hanging out at the tables in the back. In the audience today, we also have other policy professionals, those who've spent decades really engaging with this topic of what it is to be into policy and advancing North Carolina communities. So immediately after, please join us in the back of the room, grab some more snacks, and we'll be having extended conversation. But right now, let's jump in, and I want to give a quick introduction to our panelists. Next to me, we have Ziev, who is currently a policy advisor for Governor Cooper's administration. He's currently working on public safety and criminal justice reform. He is a previous educator from Philadelphia, so we're looking forward to hear more from him. We have Catherine. She is the co-chair of the Young Republican National Federation. She was first elected in 2019, and when she was elected, she was one of the youngest state chairs in the country. So really looking forward to hearing from her. Representative Smith. Charles Smith from Cumberland County is serving his first term in the North Carolina General Assembly. He's practiced law both in the public and private fields as an assistant district attorney and in private practice. And last but not least, Representative Kyle Hall from Forsyth County, who's serving his fifth term in the state legislature and one of the youngest committee chairs in the General Assembly. So please join me in thanking them for coming out today. So Representative Hall and Representative Smith, our first questions are for you. With less than 5% of the General Assembly in North Carolina, and even less than that nationally, identifying themselves as part of the millennial generation, you two are not only some of the youngest legislators in the state, but some of the youngest in the country. And even though you're in different political parties, can you share with us a little bit about how you think your generation, or if at all, it affects how you lead and what you bring to the General Assembly?
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming out tonight and trying to learn a little bit more about politics and how it could be done better, maybe. But as was mentioned, I'm currently serving in my fifth term in the North Carolina House. Hopefully, I'll get reelected again in November. But so when I first got into office in 2015, I was 25 years old. And the next youngest after me, I think, was 35. And the next youngest after him, I think, was 50. And now I would say that by most, the legislature is actually getting younger in membership. Of course, we've got Charles who came in this term, and we've got several others. And it's important to note that next term we'll have a millennial Speaker of the House, the youngest ever Speaker of the House, I believe, in Destin Hall. No relation, because I'm taller and handsome, and he's, you can fill in the blank there.
Yeah.
But so our caucus, and both the Republican and Democrat caucus, is getting younger. When I first got there, it was a little bit of a learning curve, being there and being so young, term has got that I've served, it's gotten younger, and it's become more open to new ideas from the younger generation. When I first got there, it was a little difficult to communicate some of the things that are the challenges that maybe college students are facing. You know, I was by far the most recent graduate from UNC school, UNC Chapel. Talk crap about me later. So coming with that perspective was new, and trying to talk to my older colleagues about that. But I think by and most things are getting better. We do find common ground. Charles and I do, and other Republicans and Democrats do, because we do come from a different perspective. Some issues like clean energy, for example. So I'm the Energy Utilities Committee. And the idea of clean energy, when I first got there in the Republican caucus, was not very well received, honestly, and probably more received in the Democratic caucus. But that's something that more recently, I think that both caucuses are coming more together on because of the new technologies that are out there and the public opinion. If you look at public opinion polls about clean energy in particular, Republicans and Democrats, for the by and most, do support the idea, but they also see it from different perspectives. If you look at polling, it shows that Democrats typically look at it from an environmental perspective, and Republicans look at it from more of a business perspective. But that's good. That means that we have found common ground on certain issues such as that. And so, like I said, since I was 25 and now that I'm 33, things are a lot different.
Yeah, I you know, with it being my first term, I can't really speak to the, I guess, transformation within the legislature over the last decade or so. I didn't realize you were 25 when you got in. That's pretty young, and I think there's a Democrat in Mecklenburg who might be unopposed in November, who's also probably 25 or about your age when you first got in. So I do think we'll continue to see a trend of younger folks being involved and getting elected, and that's important that we make sure our voices are heard, and we should have a seat at the table. I mean, I can think of members of the freshman Democrat and Republican caucus this cycle that are my age, if not younger, within a few years of me. So I hope that trend's able to continue. For me, I think really the willingness to work with somebody across the aisle and seek commonly respected resolutions to certain issues. That's just part of really what I do on an everyday basis. As Tariq mentioned, I started out as a prosecutor in Cumberland County. I've transitioned to civil practice where I do a lot of plaintiffs litigation, and with vast majority, if not every case I take on, I think the goal at the outset is to ultimately settle a case. It's not because you don't want to try it. It's just because trials are costly. They're time consuming, and there's a lot of uncertainty there. You might have great facts, and especially when you apply the applicable law, but you leave it up to 12 people in a box, and who knows what's going to happen. Maybe with sports betting now legal in North Carolina, that's probably a gambling joke, I guess you could make there. But so settlement is always something that you're working on, even though the person you're working with represents a different client who has different views and opinions, and is going to argue different facts. And as Kyle said, there's generally room to find common ground, and part of that is just going into any conversation with an open mind, and recognizing that just because someone might differ from you on a certain topic and have different opinions, but they ultimately really want the same thing. I think Kyle and I and everyone in the General Assembly wants to make North Carolina a better place to live, to work, to raise a family, and we might disagree on ways to get there. But knowing that person next to you, Republican or Democrat, has that same goal, it's important to listen to what they have to say, and I guess that's another point. It's just listening, working to understand where they're coming from and why they believe and think the way they do. and not just demonizing them, based on a certain belief or thinking that someone believes this way and it's because, they are a bad person or there's some nefarious reasoning behind that interest. That would be sort of, that's just how I approach any conversation. And it's, I think it's important to move the state forward.
Thank you both so much. It's really encouraging to hear, I'm sure to everyone in the room, that as the legislature gets younger, we can expect more compromise and at least hearing each other out. That just sounds awesome. I can't wait to see that and see it grow. Catherine, you've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different political arenas. You ran for office yourself. You've run a lot of campaigns. You've been involved in campaigns across the state, but also across the nation. So when you get to engage with these students, with younger people, what do you think is the most important for them to understand about partisan politics' relationship to successful governance when it comes to state politics? It's often really complicated and confounding, and most students would say they don't have a clue how it works. How do you really get to the meat of what partisan politics is and its relationship to actually getting stuff done?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think that's really important for people to know, and there's actually a Republican activist in my local area. He says this a lot of the times, and I say this to a lot of people that are my age or younger that say, what's the point of even being involved in politics? And what he says is that, well, politics is going to do you regardless of if you want to do politics. So keeping that mindset in mind, do you want to be an active part of what that future is going to look like, or do you want to just sit on the sidelines while other people are making that future for you? And so one of the things for me that I feel like people should understand is, one, the party is very important for you to be involved in. Yes, there's a lot of things that you see from both sides, the extremes of both parties, but the party is the people who tend to be the ones that recruit the candidates for your local area. And so you might be the person, if you're actively engaged, you might be the first person that they reach out to ask to run for a particular office. And so it's good for you to have those pre-existing relationships because you've been working together, you've been helping other people get elected, you've been building those relationships where people think that you're actually a serious candidate. But also the party is where the mood setting of that political party takes place. And so while we might be seeing some of these different extremes, eventually, hopefully, if you start to recruit more people that are like-minded to yourselves within your party apparatus, then you can help to shape what that party mood setting and what those tones actually look like outwardly. So that's why I think it's important to be involved. And that's something that I've tried to do even before I was state chair for the Young Republicans. I was the national committee woman for the North Carolina Young Republicans. And one of the things that I did during that time was I put together, actually at NC State, I put together an anti-human trafficking awareness event. And we had various different organizations that work within that topic all across the state. Some were national organizations. And we had people from both sides of the aisle that were elected officials that spoke at this event. And one of the things that I took from that was, one, I wanted to show that Young Republicans care more about other issues and not just these hot button issues that all of us are arguing about. That was one thing that I wanted to show people and potentially get people who are not necessarily within the party to be interested in what the Young Republicans are doing. But also, one of the things that I thought was really cool about what ended up happening with that event was Allison Dahl was actually now Representative Allison Dahl was at that event, and that was actually she was running for her first term, but she had not yet been elected. And she had a notepad. She was taking notes that entire day because it was a multiple-hour event. And she came up to some of the other Republican legislators. Representative John Hardister was one of the people there at the time. And she said that she was so taken by the fact that this event took place and that we had Republicans talking about this, that she said that if I get elected, I want to work with Republicans on this issue. And I think that was something that she ended up doing in the future. I know she's worked with Republicans over the tenure that she's been in office. So I think that those types of things are important to kind of be able to create the atmosphere for that conversation to take place. So that's something that I found very valuable. And the other thing that I wanted to mention on this topic was just that while you might be able to talk about these partisan talking points within the party itself, once you actually get elected, though, the mindset has to shift, because you're not just representing the people who are in your party. You're representing everybody that's within your district. And so while you don't necessarily want to compromise what your own personal moral beliefs and political beliefs are, you also have to keep in mind that there are other people that you're representing, and how can you, with that in mind, help to address the needs of the other people that are within your district of other parties.
Thank you, Catherine. Really quick follow-up. Just, you have a really unique experience. So tell us what, in working with a lot of the younger folks across the nation, what do you think is most rewarding and challenging about that atmosphere that you've been in?
Yeah, so I'll speak from my own personal experience. At the age of 18 is actually when I got involved in the Young Republicans, and it was because I was watching the presidential debates at the time in 2016, showing my age here a little bit. But Bernie Sanders was talking about college affordability, and while I didn't necessarily agree with his way of approaching this conversation and his solution, I did appreciate the fact that he was highlighting the fact that college does cost as much as it does. And so I was very frustrated because you didn't really hear anybody on the national level that were running for president really even talk about that higher education and college affordability was even an issue worth discussing. And so I was talking to my dad, and he basically said, Catherine, maybe instead of complaining about this, you should go out and be the voice that you want to see. And so I ended up going to my local precinct meeting for the Republican Party, and through kind of getting involved with that, getting involved with Young Republicans, I ended up meeting my state House member, and she actually filed her first House bill on my idea after she got elected. And so kind of coming from being just some random homeschooled kid who lived and you know, pastor's daughter, didn't really know anybody in politics, wasn't like a political insider or whatever. But coming from really not knowing anything about politics to then having somebody who is in a direct position to actually effectuate positive change, for them to take you seriously, that was really awesome. And it really motivated me to then pursue politics. And that's really what drove me to even go as far as I have been now with being a national co-chair for the Young Republicans. It's because of the fact that I'm able to be in the room with people, to be able to help get people elected who, because I've actually helped them, I'm able to have that back and forth with them, to be able to have that dialogue where, hey, here's some ideas that I have, or here's some ideas that the Young Republicans have, and they might actually listen to that because you've built that rapport with them. And so I think that's important. And I don't know if that directly answered fully your question, but you said what's been rewarding. I guess the other thing that I would find rewarding is that I've had people that have had daughters that are in high school or younger that have come up to me at state GOP conventions and have said that it's really inspiring to see a young woman that is in a position where they're actually a leader in an organization, and that inspires them to want to do something similar and to run for office. And so having that is pretty cool.
It does sound really cool. You have a challenge too?
Yeah, so the challenge that I would put forward for people to consider is the purity tests. I think that in the parties, I feel like there's a lot of purity tests going on, and we have to figure out, because like that we were talking about before, about the unaffiliated voters being the largest voting bloc. This is something I've actually talked about with, because I was in the Institute of Political Leadership, IOPL, in the fall. And so that organization, you have people that are Democrat and Republican, and we're all in the same class together. And one of the things that we had discussed was the fact that you're really starting to see a lot of the candidates that are running are on the extremes of both sides. And so while that's the case, and that this unaffiliated voter is becoming a larger and larger voting bloc, especially among people our age, what we're really doing is removing ourselves from the equation as far as who are our candidates. And so that was something that we were talking about, is that, hey, we're going to continue to see the extremes be the only people represented in elected office, because the parties are only going to be able to recruit from people that are within the party, people that are registered within the party. And so that's why I think that it's so important for while we may not think that the parties are necessarily representing us, that we feel like they're kind of going a little crazy or haywire, the only way that you can kind of help to level that out is by being an active participant.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Much appreciated. Ziev, you've worked in as part of Governor Cooper's team as a policy advisor in multiple different aspects. I know we first met working with the Drive Summit, and now you're doing a lot with criminal justice reform and public safety. So you've really gotten to see a lot of the behind the scenes work and what all the politics gets us later on. How do we actually effectively govern?
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the biggest similarities and differences between working in the political field on one hand versus working in a policy capacity for an elected official in their administration? And can you describe, what differences do those behind the scenes works really show us?
Yeah, so I think what we often don't see about behind the scenes is how much work goes into creating one policy, whether it's an executive order or a law or some kind of other policy. I haven't really worked on the political side of things, but it was interesting to hear some others talk about the difference between the electoral politics and the governance. And I wake up every morning not really thinking about the electoral politics as much. Obviously, it's important to think about that, but not as much. But every policy area that we come up with, there's a lot of stakeholder involvement that happens. I think we can probably all think of policies that have not worked out very successfully. And that's probably because there hasn't been enough stakeholder involvement. So when I'm developing something, I'm talking with representatives from agencies, agency staff who really have years of deep expertise and knowledge. I'm trying to talk to advocates who hopefully have lived experience in the issue, researchers that have been looking into an issue often for years. And that really goes into shaping what the policy becomes. And it's really important to be able to listen to others, to go back to the drawing board many, many, many times in some situations in order to come up with something that's actually going to work and have the desired effect and have the desired long-term impact. And so a lot of the issues are not really partisan necessarily. They're just issues that we can all recognize are out there. And we're thinking about what are the best ways to address these.
Absolutely. A quick follow-up just because of something you said. I know we've heard from everyone kind of about, there is a lot of compromise that goes on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Tell me, similar to how Catherine did, but from this policy advisor standpoint, what are some of the most rewarding and challenging aspects of kind of isolating in that policy advisor role to get the most out of your role and support Governor Cooper as much as you can? Yeah,
well, I would say I'm a bit of a nerd, and so I love to just learn about all these different things and dive really deep into an issue and be able to call on, again, advocates or agency personnel or researchers to really learn sort of more deeply about an issue. And then what's rewarding to me as well is being able to see sometimes a pretty quick impact of policies we're having and the way they affect other fields. So for example, recently the governor signed an executive order to improve reentry services for formerly incarcerated people in North Carolina and people with a criminal record. And this has really been something that I've heard bipartisan support on, and I know Republican governors have worked on as well, because it's really a win-win for our economy. I think a lot of people really believe in giving folks a second chance, but seeing that executive order go into effect and the way that's made employers think about, what are the benefits that we could get from hiring justice system involved people, seeing colleges and universities thinking about, here's a whole resource of students that are in prison that we can tap into and that we can help and really help shape lives. So just seeing how an action can have these sort of ripple effects and affect all kinds of other issues, it's been very, very rewarding.
And similar follow-up, do you have a challenge? What is that challenging piece? I know it's always hard to talk about the challenges.
Yeah, the challenges. It's complex. We work in a divided government, which I think can have a positive effect on policies because we have to consider limitations on what we can do. But that's also a challenge. There are many things that if I could wave my magic wand, I would do, but it's difficult to get those done. So that's probably the main one.
Much appreciated. Thank you all. And I'm going to pull the question and answer portion just because we can talk in the back of the room when we get to. And I really want to ask you all this because it's what's on all of our minds all the time. And we heard from Erwin earlier. He talked about political depiction of partisanship and how it's hurting communities and what North Carolina, what we could be, if we all agreed all the time, and then what it looks like based on media's description that parties are tearing at each other consistently. So what is, and this is for everyone, what is the media getting right, and what are they getting wrong? What are they missing here when it comes to politics in North Carolina and that collaborative aspect?
Well, some of the things that the media, most people have a negative depiction on, I would say, the General Assembly, that we just don't get along and that most of our votes are pretty divisive and all this goes on. But I actually pulled from the House Principal Clerk's office before I came here that of the votes, we just had our long session last year that went from January to October, probably had, probably hundreds of votes. And of those, 36% had absolutely zero no votes, passed unanimously, 36% of the bills. And 62% of the bills that we passed had 20 or less no votes. Now, Charles was probably one of them, but be that as it may, that shows you that for the most part, the things that you hear in the media are about very particular issues. And what has to be important in this conversation is that at the end of the day, yes, we're trying to work together as best as we can, but our philosophy, at least, or my philosophy, is that I'm going to vote my district first. I'm elected by my constituency to make certain decisions. And so I'm going to always have their best interests first. If I can't figure out, based on my own mental litmus test, how they feel about that, or I just don't have enough emails or phone calls about certain subjects, then maybe I would look at my own conscience next and voting based on that way. If I can't even figure out personally how I would feel about a certain issue, then I would probably turn to how maybe my caucus would want to vote. And that's extremely rare. For the most part, we know how our constituents want us to vote. And the media, portrays us in the same way that they portray Washington, D.C. sometimes. And quite frankly, Washington, D.C., they don't do anything up there. I mean, let's just be honest. They pass very little bills, and they're not like we are at the state level, because we are a part-time legislature, and we go through countless issues, and we have to have a balanced budget. So we have to pass a budget. It has to be balanced, and that's can be very difficult. So we do a lot of work, and the media doesn't really talk about that so much. They only highlight the certain times that we may be in disagreement between the Republicans and the Democrats, or the legislative branch and the executive branch, because sometimes even Democratic legislators, maybe Charles will talk about this, have a different opinion than what Governor Cooper does. And sometimes the governor will veto a bill, and even Democrats will vote with the Republicans to override those vetoes. So even, there's even different disagreements within both parties. So I think it's up to the constituency, all of us, to make really good informed decisions and try to find the best media outlet that we possibly can. Some people are getting their news on Twitter, which sometimes that's effective, but sometimes it's, I hate to say it like this, but sometimes it's fake news. You don't necessarily need to rely on Twitter. You don't necessarily need to rely on the talking heads on MSNBC and Fox News, because that's what they are. They're celebrities. They're talking heads. They're not necessarily journalists. And I don't know if there is a very good media outlet out there that fairly depicts everything that we do at the state legislature. If y'all know of one, please let me know, because I just don't know if I found it yet. But it's up to us as informed citizens to look for ourselves, listen to committee hearings, listen to session, find out what your particular representative or senator feels about an issue. Emails work, phone calls work, being informed and not necessarily relying on the media depiction of us.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Kyle just said. We sort of did the same thing. I went to the NC legislature website, where you can see each member's voting history. You know, how many votes they attended, how many they missed, votes with the majority, votes against the majority, and you know, even if you looked at what I guess you would probably consider the most liberal progressive members of my caucus within the House, that those folks, those members are voting with the majority over 50% of the time. And I don't think that's something that anyone would know based on media depiction. And most Democratic members are in the 60-70% range. So there's a lot that we agree on in Raleigh, and I think the media a lot of times tends to focus on the conflict, the strife, because that's what gets the most attention. That's what will get the most likes, the most clicks. And so I do wish that the media could take more time and focus and highlight on the common ground that we're able to find. I can speak to this as a first term member in the minority party. I mean, I worked on a few bills that I thought would have some bipartisan support. Some in the criminal justice arena, as Ziev was speaking about. Another bill had to do with domestic violence reform and working with survivors of domestic violence. And as a first-term Democrat, I was able to call and speak with committee chairs, knowing that these bills dealing with criminal justice, with domestic violence, survivor reform, would likely end up in a judiciary committee. And I called a couple of the committee chairs who are both senior Republicans, and they were both, willing to meet with me, made their schedule available. I think that week, or maybe the week after, they were very accessible, responsive to me, and that meant a lot to me. I was someone new in the building; they didn't have to do that, but they met with me. They heard me out. Representative Davis in New Hanover County down in Wilmington actually did a little bit of homework on it. He went and spoke on one of my bills. He spoke with the chief district court judge down in New Hanover County. And so, that type of corroboration and just the time he took out of his day, to hear out a freshman Democrat, that's not something you hear about in the media. There's this perception that we don't get along, we don't listen to each other. There's constant argument, and sure, there's going to be issues that we disagree on, but there's a lot more that we agree on and that unites us than what ultimately divides us. And so I think as Kyle was saying, moving forward, I would tell you to get your news from various media outlets. Don't rely solely on Twitter or Fox or CNN. Twitter's great. If I want to learn something quick and know what's going on, I'll hop on Twitter. But again, I think with Twitter, you get talking heads and then extreme points of view, and I think that the perception is sort of perpetual. The talking heads will put forth these extreme views. People in the public, candidates, hear these extreme views and think, oh, well, that's what's normal. That's what this party is thinking, and so they begin expounding or those types of ideals, beliefs, and it's a cyclical. It's cyclical in nature, and so I would just encourage you to have conversations with people who may disagree with you on certain things. Be open to listening to opinions that are different than yours, and just keep an open mind.
Yeah, Twitter is awesome. Usually 90% of the time it's NC poll stuff, but this last week it's been March Madness. So hopefully it switches back after the 19th, whenever. Catherine, you are.
Yeah, so I just wanted to recommend a podcast to you guys if you guys haven't listened to it, but it's called the Do Politics Better podcast. And Brian Lewis and Sky David are two lobbyists, and they have Democrats and Republican legislators, and they have other types of people on as well. But I really appreciated one of the episodes they did where Allison Dahl and I think Senator Todd Johnson was the other person that was on with her. And I mean, at certain points she was crying, but it was very sweet to kind of just hear their friendship throughout the episode, while they might be of different parties. And she was upset because of they were talking about the abortion issue and how they differed on that particular issue, and that caused a rift in certain relationships, but they were still friends. And that was something that was kind of the theme of that episode. And so I really appreciated hearing that while we might assume that just because of what we're hearing, that it's like everyone's public enemy number one if they're of the opposite party. But from what I hear, they hang out. So, but if you guys are interested in listening to that, that's something that I like to listen to as well.
And I would say something that everyone's touched on a little bit is just how much does occur in local politics on the state level, county level, city level. And we sort of have had recently a nationalization of politics. I wouldn't blame the media 100%. I think, local newsrooms have been under-resourced. But it's on the local level, so much is dealt with that really isn't partisan. Your city is trying to figure out how can we better take out the trash, right? And I think it's easy to pay attention to what's going on in the White House or in Congress. In Congress, not very much is going on. But on the state and local level, so much is going on, and also you can have such an effect. You really can call or email your legislators, and they will hear you out. On the city level, on the county level, like those people are very accessible to you. So I would really recommend trying to keep up with what's happening locally, read those local news sites, maybe subscribe to them so that they are better resourced, and get involved in that way.
Thank you so much. We've got time for one more quick question. Please stick around afterwards if you have questions and want to talk with any of our awesome panelists. But a lot of the students that are here today, and even some people who might have started a first career, want to get involved. They want to do more politically. They want to do more policy work. So what advice do you have to young people who might not have had that insight? They haven't gotten there yet. They don't know how to break into that space. What advice do you have for those sitting in the audience today that are looking for that opportunity?
First off, depending on what your political party is, I'm sure NC State has a college Republicans and a college Democrats or whatever it may be. Get involved with them that way. Get involved with your local parties, and I'm sure Catherine will talk on that too. But also at being here at NC State, being in Raleigh, you have access to state government, all state government. So take advantage of some of the internships that are available at the General Assembly. I think pretty much any legislator gets an intern. I think actually we just got an email sometime this week saying our summer internship program is open up for applications and resumes. And so legislators will be looking to hire interns to serve in the summer. And the cool thing is not only do you get to be there and be in a legislative office and see what we do on a daily basis and help constituents and go to committee hearings and go to session, but I guess more importantly to college students, you get paid. So it's pretty nice. So you get some beer and pizza money, but get involved with internships that way. I don't know if Charles, you've got anything else to add to that.
Yeah, well, first-term legislators don't get interns, so that's a luxury only for Kyle. I can get pages, high school pages, not paid though, less enticing. Yeah. But no, I agree with everything Kyle said. Mentioning your proximity to the legislature, to the General Assembly building, just go down. If you know we're in session one day, come down to the building. If there's votes, go up in the gallery. Rarely is I think maybe the abortion vote was about the only time the gallery's been just packed. You can generally find a seat and listen to see what's going on. It might be it moves kind of quickly. I found that out in the beginning of my first term. So, you got to pay attention. But outside of that, just maybe once you're home or figure out what you want to do after college, get involved locally. I mean, that's what I did. After I left the DA's office in Cumberland County, I got a little bit more involved with the Cumberland County Democratic Party. And honestly, that's really how I ended up here. My predecessor, Billy Richardson, decided he was retiring, and he reached out to me, someone I've known for a long time, an old family friend. And at that point, I'd been involved with the Cumberland County Democratic Party for about 1.5, 2 years, and so I ended up running for his seat. And I don't think I would be up here if I hadn't gotten involved locally. So would definitely think. I mean, that's just the best place to start. Just that grassroots and getting your feet on the ground in your local community.
Yeah, I would, to what Kyle Hall was alluding to, get involved with the Young Republicans or the Young Democrats, depending on which party you're in. It's a really great place to kind of get your feet wet. And There's a lot of different things that you can do even within those organizations, depending on your interest, whether it be grassroots or more policy oriented. If you're interested in getting more involved locally to potentially run for office, I would suggest you get involved with like your local Rotary Club and stuff like that. And in that same vein of thought, IOPL, which I mentioned earlier, is a very good program. And I think that it's really helpful because at least for me, I didn't really have a lot of interactions with people that were of the other party. And so having people that you have friendships with by the end of it, and I think that it's really helpful to be able to say, you know what, we may disagree on certain things, but we can agree on other things, and we can agree that you're a good person. And I think that that's really important. The other thing that I would say is when I was first getting involved in politics, I ended up meeting the previous state chair, 2 chairs before me for Young Republicans. He's since aged out now, but we became best friends, and he ended up kind of becoming my political mentor. And so everything that I've been through in politics, I've always used him as a sounding board, whether or not something was a good idea to pursue or not. And did he legitimately think that I should, did he actually, and he was willing to be honest with me and say, I think that's a terrible idea, or you should have done this differently. These are the things you should be doing. And you need to have somebody who's willing to be honest with you, somebody that you respect, who's kind of done this a little bit longer than you. Keep your circle tight. Don't trust everyone. And obviously you want to be friends with everyone and get to know people, network. But as far as people that you're telling your deepest, darkest secrets, things that you're trying to pursue, I would make sure that that circle is very tiny of people that you actually legitimately trust, because you can get burned by people that you think are your friends in the moment. Continue to show up. You know, we as young people might have different ideas than people that have been in the party longer than us. And some people might not like the fact that you have different ideas than them, but don't allow for that to make you want to leave. Be an active participant, continue to show up, because eventually the people who choose to continue to participate are the people who are going to shape the future. So just don't give up and continue to pursue what you want to do. And the other thing is be honest. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. Don't try to become something just to get ahead. Because when you reach whatever goal you want within politics, you want to still be able to look at yourself and be like, that is actually who I am, versus something that you've kind of created over time in order to get to that point. And one last thing, as far as getting involved, I mean, different people have different paths, and somebody that you guys may have seen in the news recently is Addison McDowell, who won that congressional primary. And he was somebody that people didn't really even know, but he worked for Ted Budd before, and Ted Budd was one of his biggest supporters within this race and really helped open a lot of doors for him. And obviously he did a lot of work himself, but having Ted Budd make fundraising calls for you on your behalf, that's pretty big. And so, I mean, having relationships that you build over time throughout your political career are important for you to keep those warm and to continue to follow up with those people, make time for them. And the other thing I will mention, sorry, I keep on adding things, this is the last thing, but one of the things that I felt really scared to do when I first got involved in politics was to try to set up a meeting with your legislators, have a conversation with them. They're not these scary people. You can reach out to them, and they will most likely be willing to meet with you either at their Raleigh office, or if you want to meet, if you're one of their constituents, meet them for coffee within the district. I've done that with several different legislators, and usually they can give you at least 5 to 10 minutes of their time. And if you have ideas, they want to hear from you. They don't want to just hear the people that are complaining about them all the time through email. So if you actually have legitimate ideas, I'm sure that they would love to hear from you. So don't hesitate to reach out.
And all the people in the General Assembly aren't that scary. Representative Hall and Representative Smith over there, those are some of the nicer. Zee, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say to keep studying, keep thinking very critically about issues. I think the things I learned in school and high school and college have really shaped how I think about things. If there's an issue you're passionate about, really be a student of the history of that issue. I don't mean to go out and change your major to a history major. I just mean, you know, if you're interested in the environment, look at the history of environmental activism. You know, whatever you're interested in, really study that deeply. read what people are currently thinking. The issues we're facing right now are new and novel, but there really is a corollary in history to the moment we're facing or to specific issues. So I would really encourage that and encourage talking to people who might disagree with you or who have different perspectives and viewpoints on an issue.
Thank you all so much. Please join me in giving our panelists a round of applause. It is always so great to hear from other young people who are super active and super nerdy about North Carolina policy and what it looks like for our future and how we're really all aiming in the same direction, which we heard from both representatives today. We're aiming in the right direction. We might disagree on how we get there, but we're all pushing forward. And as our legislature gets younger, we're really going to get hyped up about being more motivated and active. So really looking forward to that. Thank you to the School of Public and International Affairs. Again, so great to be able to co-host here in the Hunt Library. I love Governor Hunt. I'm sure plenty of you love Governor Hunt. So really great to be here in this library after his namesake. Now to get to the food and really enjoy some of these conversations, please stick around and enjoy those conversations with us about what policy looks like in North Carolina and how you can get more involved and what that involvement will look like. And if it really makes you as nerdy as it sounds, it might only slightly. Really quickly, there's also some stickers and other swag that we've got from the Institute for Emerging Issues back there, and some QR codes that you'll be able to scan and talk about what issues are important to you. IEI is based here in the Hunt Library. So if you have future questions, there's several of us in the room from IEI, several from SPIA in the room as well. So if you have any additional questions for any of us, please just let us know. Thank you all for taking the time to come see us today. Thank you.